Okay. Good morning and good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to our AIESEP Connect. It's our May version, and it gives me great joy to introduce one of our brand new special interest groups who has just started up this year. This will be our Technology SIG, and I'm going to pass straight over to them to take over the session and to take us through their topic for today. I'm just going to remind everybody before we start, though, that this is being recorded for both YouTube and for the podcast. So please be mindful in terms of your comments or your questions. Please also add all your questions as we go in the chat, and we will pick them up at the end of the presentation. I'm going to hand over to the team who will introduce themselves.
That's amazing. Thanks ever so much, Christy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AIESEP Connect session on modalities and pedagogies, exploring digital learning across in-person, hybrid and remote physical education contexts. We are really delighted you could join us today. My name is Julia Sargent, and I will briefly ask the other people that are presenting today to introduce themselves. So, Chad.
Hi, everyone. Chad Killian here, University of New Hampshire in the US. Thanks for coming on.
And Ove?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Wesley. I work at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. So, welcome.
And do we have Maria Jose? No? Okay.
Yeah, she's
hopefully
you're muted, Maria.
Sorry. My name is Maria Jose Camacho Miñano from the University Complutense of Madrid, Spain.
Thank you very much. So we're really delighted that you could join us today, wherever in the world you're joining us from. A brief overview of today's session is a welcome and introduction to the SIG itself. Chad will then do a brief intro to the session context. We will then have 3 mini presentations by Ove, Maria Jose and Chad, with some time for questions after each session, before hopefully some time for moderated discussion before closing. So this session today is part of the new AIESEP special interest group, as Christy mentioned, called Digital Technologies for Teaching, Learning and Health Promotion. And it's made up of several AIESEP members, Chad Killian as chair, myself as chair-elect, and Uwe Osterli as chair-elect-elect. This has been a product in the making, but largely stemmed a bit before AIESEP in Finland last year, which is where the photo on the right-hand side of your screen was taken, after we presented a symposium exploring different aspects of technology in PE. So briefly, the main parts of the SIG mission are to provide a community of members to share ideas, to collaborate and nurture our ideas related to the roles and applications of digital technologies in health, PE, sport, and also physical activity. And our purpose is to advance knowledge and critical understanding of digital technologies in a variety of contexts through international collaboration with like-minded colleagues such as yourselves. Our aim is to provide a global lens in which to support physical activity opportunities. So that's a very brief overview, and I hope if you haven't already done so, you can join us on X or Twitter for more info about our SIG activities. I'm now going to hand over to Chad for the session intro. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Julia. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. As we begin today's session, I'd like to frame our discussion by introducing 2 ideas that may help anchor our time together. First is the spectrum of digital learning, modalities in health and physical education, which can help us recognize the varied ways digital technology can be integrated into instructional practice across contexts. The second idea is this concept of entangled pedagogy, which invites us to think more critically and relationally about educational design and practice across the socio-educational ecology. In this chapter, Ove and I wrote for the Rutledge Resources Online Sports Studies series. We propose that digital learning in health and physical education exists along a continuum of instructional formats or modalities, including in-personal digital instruction, where digital tools support real-time on-site learning, hybrid or what we call flipped learning, where digital materials scaffold content ahead of face-to-face or synchronous application, and fully remote learning, where instruction and engagement occur entirely online and often asynchronously. We argued in this chapter that each modality brings distinct opportunities and constraints depending on how they're designed, implemented, and experienced by students. But we know these modalities are not just neutral digital containers or passive formats where we simply drop content for students to consume. As many of us know, digital learning is shaped by a complex interplay of factors, and each factor is shaped by a broader ecosystem of pedagogical choices, institutional structures, student needs, social expectations, among many other things. In other words, these modalities don't just exist to organize our instruction. They really reflect underlying assumptions about what teaching and learning should look like, where it takes place, who holds agency, and what outcomes matter. This is where Fawn's concept of entangled pedagogy becomes particularly useful to us. It reminds us that technology and pedagogy are not separate decisions made in a prescribed sequence. They're deeply intertwined and co-constructed through values, context, tools, and intentions. Understanding modality through this lens of entangled pedagogy can help us ask not just how we teach with technology, but what technology reveals and reinforces about our teaching. Fawn's 2022 article critiques the dominant pedagogy first versus technology first discourse, which often forces us into a false binary or dichotomy where we either drive student learning through human-centered methods and treat technology as a set of neutral tools, or we view technology as the innovation and the main driver of learning itself. Instead, Fawns proposes this idea of entangled pedagogy, where pedagogy is understood not just as a teaching method or instructional delivery choice, but more as a product of ongoing situated negotiation among the educational ecology of people, tools, values, purposes, methods, and context. In other words, pedagogy is not just something that comes before technology or after it. It comes with technology. It is shaped by it and shapes it in return. So we can apply this idea of entangled pedagogy to the different digital learning modalities we're exploring today. For in-person instruction, the decision to use wearable fitness trackers or skill analysis apps during class, for example, isn't simply a technological enhancement intended to increase student engagement or motivation. This decision explicitly or implicitly reflects pedagogical values around assessment, feedback, student autonomy, and data literacy. And those values themselves are shaped by what school or government policy may dictate, how the school supports subject areas through funding, the learning space allocation, what the teacher believes, and what students may be motivated by, for example. In hybrid or flipped modalities, a teacher's choice to assign a pre-class video might stem from limited instructional time during face-to-face classes or large class size pressures, may stem from a belief in self-paced learning, a desire to expand physical activity opportunities beyond physical education, or even just having access to a district-provided learning management system. But how students actually engage with that digital content and how it's used in class depends on complex entanglements of the digital learning design, the class culture and norms, student expectations, community access to devices, parental support, etc. And we get to fully remote instruction, where, when, and under what circumstances students engage in learning can vary widely. And the use of asynchronous videos or fitness tracking apps may be shaped by school policy mandates, virtual school funding, outsourced vendors, or access and equity constraints to equipment and space. Here, the pedagogy is entangled not just with the devices, but with instructional governance, student autonomy, family support, and community infrastructure. So rather than seeing these modalities as static, we invite you to view them as entangled enactments that are always contingent on the ecology of values, infrastructures, and lived experiences. Viewing digital learning through the lens of entangled pedagogy can help us ask deeper questions like, what are we really valuing in our instructional choices? How can we invite students to co-construct digital learning experiences? Where do policy, access, and ethics enter into the design of digital learning and physical education? I like asking questions if any of you know me. What do these technologies assume about our students and what do they erase? How do they reflect and potentially distort the human experiences of movement, motivation, and the relationships that are central to physical education? So these are the kind of questions we hope to grapple with through this SIG over the long term, and perhaps some of our presentations will ask and unpack some of these as well. So with that in mind, let's begin with Maria Jose, who will explore some in-personal digital learning applications in traditional school settings. Then we'll hear from Ove, who will focus on flipped or hybrid learning. And then finally, I'll offer some insights on fully remote digital learning. So as we move through these examples, I just encourage you to keep the entangled pedagogy lens at the forefront, not to overcomplicate things, but to better see the subtle pedagogical work we all do when we do integrate technology into our teaching. So I'll send it over to you, Maria Jose.
Thank you so much, Chad. My approach to impersonal digital learning is focused on critical pedagogies and how to develop these critical pedagogies in schools involving teachers of physical education, teachers in general, and students. I focus in critical digital health understood of those digital technologies for healthy lifestyle promotion, such as apps, fitness on social media, wearable devices, etc. We realize that all these all these digital technologies function in the schools as a high structure technologies, and we focus on trying to develop a critical understanding to these technologies. How can I pass the screen? Okay, thank you. We are developing this approach to critical digital health pedagogies in the schools through different projects, one with PE teachers, and currently we are working with students in schools trying to develop these pedagogies developing a collaborative approach, and we are a team of researchers from different universities, and I would like to recognize the work of my colleagues from the University of Bath, Emma Rich, Shirley Gray and Sarah McIsaac from the University of Edinburgh, Christina Kumpulainen from the University of British Columbia in Canada, and Ricardo Montt and Noemi Avila, who are collaborating closer with me at the University Complutense of Madrid. In our technological society, we already know that all this knowledge about healthy lifestyle technologies circulates through digital technologies, and it's frequent that this pedagogy often compete and enter into tension with formal educative spaces such as physical education. So our approach is try to establish some kind of bridges between these two knowledge that seems to circulate in a very separate and conflicting ways. So we want to help young people to learn how to navigate the extensive information and multiple knowledge forms that they acquire through digital technologies that can be both positive and negative. And we understand that all this knowledge is mainly complex, and we would like to work with them to unpack and understand how to help young people and their PE teachers to adopt a critical approach. In this quotation, I remember how I feel stuck, moved by a girl that said that all the pressure around the body that she suffered through digital technologies was due to the patriarchy, but she admitted that despite having all these knowledges, these body pressures still affect her because they have all this much inside. So it's hard to get rid of those thoughts. So our research reveals that even though participants critically evaluate these social media representations, all these evoke powerful effects of desire to achieve the perfect body. So, and we already know that digital literacy focus only on critiquing digital media in a cognitive way does not automatically lead to the capacity to resist effectively these desires that can arise. So we need to understand and transform not only young people's normative meanings around digital technologies, but their normative effects, and how to understand all this within their relations and complexities within their own lives. So we adopt a new materialist approach to digital health pedagogies. This approach allows us to explore how physical education and health is being reassembled through digital health technologies. In other words, how digital technologies come to matter in pedagogical practice. And we move behind the idea of that digital technologies are separate to bodies, but are part of this assemblage and produce significant effects in relation to other bodies, other things that are within the classroom. And all this is not fixed, but are elements that entangled in the pedagogical encounter. Our idea is to move behind binary thinking, such as human, non-human, mind, body, public, private, online, offline, with the idea to expand the range of critical possibilities in a way that recognizes the agential capacities of the assemblage learning digital health technologies, the affective forces involved, and the relational dimension, and all this with the idea to produce pedagogical interruptions that allow young people to reimagine new futures and possibilities. And we think that thinking relationally, we can understand the affordances and effects of digital interactions of young people with these technologies. So our approach is to try new things, to bring the unknown and invention practice as a key element of this critical pedagogical exchange, collaborating with young people and their students and their teachers. Sorry. The purpose of both the pedagogical and research activities is to mobilize the assemblage of human digital relation to understand this digital agency. And in this process, the focus is on the embodied, the sensory, and the affective relationalities that unfold in these interactions. And we do this through different, bringing different materials and strategies to the classroom, as I'm going to show in the small example. And we focus on one rhizomatic and complex experience of collaborative knowledge production in which we don't know what is going to happen in advance. So just to explain a little bit more clearly, we focus some phases just to understanding young people affective engagement, try to broaden their perspective, co-creating new possibilities, and then opening what to do and what has been learned to other people, so their learnings. But these phases are like quite rhizomatic and blurred, so it's not, they are not phases as we usually understand phases. It's like this kind of rhizomatic approach. And for example, in what we are doing is try to bring what young people are learning through digital technologies outside the classroom to the classroom. So for example, here we bring which apps they use to learn in different spaces to learn around health. It's here you can see examples of content young people learn through digital technology. So they bring all this knowledge and experience to the classroom, and we share and discuss this content. We put into practice some of this content young people share, not only doing the physical activities that influencer can tell the students to do it, but also trying to re-embody the different experience and affectivities they experience when performing this kind of digital movements. And in this way, we try to decenter the subject and bring to the conversation other materials, other possibilities, such as, for example, here, emojis or drawing data or other different artistic things and creative methodologies as research and as pedagogy, just to mobilize and understand in a deeply way the effect involved in their interaction with digital technologies outside the school. Here, for example, you can see how we develop some kind of pedagogical invention and from the mechanic repetitive movements suggested by Fitness App. During this activity, they reimagine and collaboratively invent a moving avatar. They play it a lot. They invent different ways of movement with these kind of collective avatars of digital health. And with these kind of invitations, we position young people at the center of their research encounter. So we have to disappear to be outside the center and the center us as researchers and see what can appear in this interaction of human, non-human, and digital materials and non-digital things within the space of the school setting in different classrooms. And in this way, we sharpen the critical affectivities of young people, trying to develop the senses and other relationalities and affects. Here, for example, in the second example, we are trying to understand the engagement of young people with digital technologies, and we are using digital diaries. Here, for example, young people serve with us in our research during 10 days what kind of digital technologies they use for health promotion. And here are some examples. And what we are doing now is try to co-create and use these digital diaries that young people share with us as a kind of reanimation of the research material to focus on what matters to young people. And in this way, we are developing artifacts for exhibition and also multimodal educative resources for educators with the public can also interact with. And finally, just for my conclusion, here you have another research guide that we have developed, funded by the National Governing Body of Equality in Spain. And the future is to, I think, consider the potential of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approaches, integrating the critical capacities within the whole school frameworks, as I know other researchers are going to say later. Focus on addressing health inequalities in digital research is important. The ethical issues as the core of our teaching and researching practice when we use digital technologies. Also consider that digital technologies are always evolving, so it's the thing is not to focus too much in the technologies, but the affordance of the technologies, and develop a pedagogical framework. It's important, trying to engage different stakeholders. Finally, we in research and teaching with digital technologies in person in the schools has to be conceived from my point of view as a lively assemblage of thinking and doing, which is co-evolving, interacting with us, our becoming understanding, and also with young people, teachers, and schools as part of all this collaborative experience. We are living this with doubts, insecurities through the process, because the idea is to constant questioning and accept not knowing, to open new opportunities and possibilities for young people being in a different way critical towards digital technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria Jose. Very interesting presentation, as I'm sure you'll all agree. We do have a question in the chat that has come from Fiona around how we can, or how can we educate for digital well-being in the circumstances and the time that we find ourselves in?
For digital, I don't know, bunny word. What's bunny word? I don't know. But yeah, between answers non-linear and incomprehensive. I don't understand very well the question, but yeah, one of the barriers we are encounter is the discourse against digital technologies. So in some schools, for example, digital technologies and specifically mobile phones are banned. But within, and when we speak with teachers, they understand that what we are doing is try to bring what they are doing outside. Just when they go outside, just they turn on their phones and they develop a whole life there online. So I don't think this is the answer from an educative point of view, because other people, for example, and companies, influencer and digital companies, knows that they can take advantage of all these young people without any kind of responsible adults helping them to navigate through all these complex landscape. So I think it's digital technologies are going to be here forever, and it's the easy and simple thing is, okay, block digital technologies, ban digital technologies in the schools, but young people need this kind of education. They told us we need it. How to do it? I think digital technologies should not be in the center of the pedagogical process. It's part of the pedagogical process, but we can develop it using digital technologies, but using other materials, conversation, young people, their relationships, and I think it's a more critical, a more creative approach in which the digital is part of the pedagogical encounter, but it's not at the center of at the center at the young people. I don't know if explain.
Thank you very much, Maria. That was really insightful, and I think as well, digital or non-digital, when we're thinking about well-being, is it something that individuals work on? It's something that doesn't just materialize. It's something that we need to practice and work through. So again, this is something that feeds through into future work as well. So thank you very much, Maria Jose, for your presentation. I'm now going to hand over to Ove for the second mini presentation today. Thank you, Ove.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you, Maria, as well. It's very interesting to follow. At the same time, think about what I'm gonna say, maybe find some connections. And I also look at my battery capacity. I'm outside in the streets and I didn't find any place to charge. So I hope my battery will last through the last half hour of this meeting. But anyway, what I'm gonna present is a product that has developed for about a decade and was just published in Physical Education and Sports Pedagogy just days ago. So it was really timely according to this meeting that I could present this. And it's about flipped learning in physical education and the travel we've had since us started looking into practicing and researching this approach. And so I will say thank you so much to Chad for being part of this publication that I'm going to present briefly. This was originally a keynote speech I gave to a conference in Turkey in October, and I thought it had potential to develop to an article, and Chad was all aboard to help me with that. So thank you so much. But it's also, as these words on this slide says, that this has been a development over the last decade. So of course, there is a lot of people to thank for this development. So this is something that we observe, and it's not just presenting what we have done, but also Julia has been an important part of this, especially with the book that we published, and also the symposiums we have had. So it's been a really fruitful work the last decade, and it started at AIESEP conference in Wyoming in 2016. So also very nice to say thank you to the AIESEP organization for me and Chad by chance meeting at that conference and presenting on the same topic that we had just started to discover. So this presentation or this publication was supposed to be like a celebration of these decades, but it got published a bit too fast. So we are about 9.5 years away, but we call it a decade. But we have in the literature discovered and elaborated on 3 different evolutions, and it's not that they are very, very distinct, but we have like identified 3 different lines of evolution that we elaborate on, and that is from the definition, that we see that it goes from a generic to a more specific definition, and also that flipped learning is perceived from being perceived more of a method to now that we can identify it and explain it and use it as a pedagogical framework, as also connected to what Chad was talking about. That I'm going to say a bit more about that. And also we see that we have an evolution from flipped learning in physical education being bound to the school area or the gym, that we now see that it's also something that we can identify much beyond, both in time and place. So when we talk about definition, we started often by using what was called the flipped learning network. They had a definition of what it was flipped learning more than a decade ago, and we quickly realized that this definition really didn't fit into a practical subject as physical education, as it took more of a cognitive approach and a more of a, it really made sense in STEM subjects, for example, just like the moving of what is happening where. So in our book from 22, we tried to buy the book and by the works that have been done, and throughout that book we wanted to make a more of a definition that was specific to the values and to the practice and to the applications of physical education as a practical aesthetical subject. So the working definition is that flipped learning uses asynchronous digital instruction to expand learning and promote physical activity opportunities beyond the physical education class. It is designed to enrich student skills and knowledge for upcoming face-to-face classes where they engage in collaborative, guided movement experiences intended to deepen their prior learning. So that's the working definition that we proposed through that book for flipped learning in physical education. And we believe that this has also connection to the next area of development about flipped learning being a framework. So this definition from generic to specific by definition, and is enriching the learning experience. I think you can go one back maybe, but I'm going to read the slide. So it will enrich the learning experience by definition, and by definition, we promote physical activity beyond the school or the gym. We also encourage collaborative learning, and we inform future research and practice. And we guide practical implementation, and we encourage innovation. So we feel that it's a broad and maybe a far-fetched definition, but we feel that this is much more a subject-specific definition of flipped learning to PE. So the next one is from a method to a framework, and we call it the road to entangled pedagogy. And here we discuss the shift from flipped learning being viewed almost exclusively as a content delivery modality to its role as an entangled pedagogy, where technology and pedagogy should co-evolve. We also connect this framework to the whole of school frameworks and see how this aligns well with those documents and those practices and upcoming research as well. As you can see on the next slide, how we, through this publication, see how this aligns to the Comprehensive School Physical Activity Program, for example. So this is something about seeing that we expand from that flipped learning in PE goes beyond the gym, and could it involve both homes, students, and communities as well. So now we also elaborate on the horizon ahead in this presentation. And for the practice in the future, we really draw on the book that we published, and that had three areas of guidance for practice in the future. And that was when coming into using and practicing flipped learning in physical education, it's important to realize that it's possible to start small, but also it's important to aim for high quality. And then we also emphasize that it's in the context of physical education, it's important to see to expand, not just to replicate. And maybe this is some of the parts that really was useful to make a new definition, that because in a more traditional way of applying flipped learning in STEM subjects, it was more about shifting what was done where. But in a PE context, it's more about expanding the learning opportunities and not just replicating or moving them. And the last guidance we had for practice in the future was that it's important to champion the culture for a meaningful routine of homework, where this is a context where either learning or homework are common things to think about. So also this entails that flipped learning in PE is not something that might be well received the first time you try to apply it. It needs to be something that you learn to work around, and that you by time would see that this is a fruitful way of doing PE. So these are the three practices, or the three guidance for practice in the future. And for learning, for research in the future, we highlight some points, and that is that we need more and deeper understanding of the key variables. We need to explore, and we really want researchers to explore innovative approaches, as we have gone from calling flipped learning a method to a framework. That also opens up for a whole new ways of doing flipped learning, and it shouldn't just be confined to having a video as a preparation and then do something in school. So the new definition and the new ways of the development of flipped learning in PE really opens up for exploring innovative approaches that could fit and be guided by this framework. Also, by that we really want to see that the whole of school frameworks could be integrated into a flipped learning framework, where you can see the school, home, and communities working together for expanding learning opportunities and physical activity opportunities for both young people, but also that it could affect their closest environments, like family and community. And also, it's important to conduct comparative and contextual studies across educational and cultural settings, and by that addressing the knowledge gaps that we have discovered. So to the next one, I have just some concluding thoughts, and that is that the horizon of flipped learning, it's not a distant goal, but it has been and still will be a journey, and that will reflect the ongoing commitment to exploring innovative, evidence-informed strategies that enhance the quality of PE, expanding opportunities to learn and to foster lifelong physical activity habits. Yeah, I might have done that a bit quicker than 10 minutes, but I was also looking at my battery capacity, so I thought, yeah, we can open for some comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Ovi. We've got several questions in the chat. I'll take the one from Christy first, if that's okay. So Christy asks about, so you mentioned about this road to entangled pedagogy, and she was asking across different age phases, so from early years through to older adolescence, what actions or differences should we be applying to flipped learning for these different age phases?
It's hard to give a really concrete answer on the go, but I see, and I've seen through the last years, that we have been also trying to apply the flipped learning framework to younger and younger students. And I had a master student last year. He did an intervention study with year 2 students, that's 7-8 years old, and he interviewed parents after that, and he really saw that, and the parents also saw that we could really do something about the transparency of the subject. So how families and parents could really observe and take part in what was modern PE, which really differed from when their own PE experiences, which was like their own reference point. So, and the tasks or the homework that he gave the year 2 students were to watch some preparational material to be prepared for what to do, but also some reflex questions, maybe about cooperation. So they had parents and pupils discussing what does it mean to cooperate, or what does it mean to be a good teammate, or stuff like that. So he really saw that doing flipped learning in PE could engage the families in discussing these things, and by that really expanding the learning opportunities for these children in year 2, and at the same time be a more transparent educational approach. So that was one example how this framework has evolved from being applied maybe more for older students, and being more maybe just delivering some cognitive theoretical addition to what they're going to do in school, which we observed in early research on flipped learning in PE. So I'm not sure if that really grasped your question, Christy.
I think it's as well, as your work develops, Ove, is thinking about how this translates into those different contexts. So from like primary, early years right through to adolescence, as Christy mentioned. We do have some other questions from Fiona and Antonio, which I have acknowledged, but in terms of time, perhaps that's something we can dovetail to at the end. And I will hand over to Chad for the final of the mini presentations. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'll try to be quick so we have some time at the end to answer and discuss with the group. I'm really thankful this group's kind of coming together. I think we're off to a great start. Lots of things turning in my brain already from Maria, Jose, and Ove's presentation and even these questions. So thanks again for being here. I'm going to talk about fully remote digital learning. And with fully remote physical education, the entire physical education and school experience itself is virtual. Instruction, interaction, and learning are mediated entirely through digital platforms. So this is a little different than the two modalities we've discussed that so far that incorporate face-to-face. The challenge with fully online or virtual physical education is it's not simply how to deliver PE content online, as we all discovered during COVID. But really, it's how we can reimagine the structures, relationships, and expectations that normally sustain physical education and physical activity within a virtual school setting. This matters because, as we know, school plays a vital role in shaping students' physical activity behaviors, as this fairly complicated model demonstrates. Students are more active within the structure of school day than during unstructured non-school days. For example, during summers, this structured day hypothesis puts forth, but I would argue that this also applies to virtual school students who don't have the same schedule as everyone else. So what happens when, quote unquote, going to school means logging in from a student's bedroom, logging in from a living room or a kitchen table or a car, and often learning asynchronously with very little embodied interaction with peers or teachers? We're conducting a recent scoping review right now. This is a methodology paper, but it kind of lays the groundwork for what we hope will come out later this summer. And the question we ask is how whole of school physical activity promotion is or isn't being conceptualized within the context of virtual schools. This is the protocol that outlines a rationale and methods, and I'll report on some results a little bit more at St. Pete. So if anybody's going to AIESEP, I'll give you some results there. But our expectations during this process were confirmed that while there's a growing body of literature on remote or digital physical education, especially during and post-COVID, there is a striking gap when it comes to promoting physical activity and physical education across the full school day and the whole school systems in these virtual settings. The frameworks that guide active school efforts, like the Comprehensive School Physical Activity Program in the US, now Active School Cultures, which is sort of an extension of that. Some of you might be familiar with the Creating Active Schools in the UK, and I know other European countries have similar frameworks. All of these frameworks were designed with brick and mortar campuses in mind, and rightfully so. The vast majority of students attend those campuses, but as we're seeing an increase in virtual school attendance, at least in the United States, the problem is that these models assume a shared place, a shared schedule, and a shared community. But virtual schools are distributed, they're digital, they're decontextualized, which raises questions not just about implementation, but also of definition. Within these frameworks and their components, there's operationalizations for exclusive application in physical schools with proximal communities. So then, here come the questions. What counts as, quote, school physical activity opportunity when school itself isn't a physical place? Can a, quote, walk to class be counted if that happens not between the science wing and the gymnasium, but between a child's kitchen and their desk in the basement? Is it active transport to school when a student descends the steps to her workstation in her parents' basement? What counts as before and after school physical activity within an asynchronous curriculum that allows for fully autonomous student engagement? In other words, in virtual schools without school days as we define them, and so on. This is where I think Fawn's concept of entangled pedagogy has been helpful for me, and it may become especially useful when we start thinking about virtual school settings and virtual PE and specifically. In the case of fully remote physical education, we can't cleanly separate technology from pedagogy or content from context. The modalities, tools, and platforms through which students engage in physical education are not just vehicles for delivering instruction in these cases. They shape how students move or don't move, how teachers plan and assess, and what values and purposes are being reinforced. Well, let's take an example. In some virtual physical education programs that I'm familiar with, students are asked to wear fitness trackers or complete daily physical activity logs using mobile applications. On the surface, this looks like a creative workaround for the lack of shared gym space, but pedagogically, it reinforces a view of physical activity as self-managed, individualized, and data-driven. The learning experience becomes entangled with broader logics of surveillance, compliance, and quantification, often without opportunities or explicit opportunities for social interaction, creativity, or play, unless the student engages in that on their own. On the other hand, some programs have begun to experiment with synchronous movement sessions, family-based physical activity challenges, or video-based skill practice with live peer feedback. These approaches then shift the entanglement. They emphasize collaboration, shared effort, relational learning, even at a distance. But then again, they also depend on digital fluency, flexible schedules, and home environments that support physical activity, which now raises issues of access, space, and equity. So what does all of this very brief overview tell us? First, I think it says that fully remote physical education is not just a technical problem of how to deliver physical education and promote physical activity online. It really is a pedagogical challenge of how to design meaningful, equitable movement experiences when the infrastructure of the school is digital and the community is distributed. Second, it tells us that frameworks we use to guide whole of school physical activity promotion must evolve. We can't simply apply the CISPAP or active school model wholesale to virtual settings without interrogating their assumptions. We need new frameworks or at least flexible adaptations that consider how school time is structured in virtual environments, what even counts as, quote, school-based physical activity when the school is at home, in the car, at work, and how families, platforms, and asynchronous tools function as extensions of school-based supports. Third thing I think we can glean from this is that research and policy are lagging behind practice, as we found in our scoping review. We surfaced a limited number of studies that address physical activity promotion outside of physical education context within virtual schools. Most of what we found focused narrowly on remote PE courses, with few examples of whole-day strategies, recess and movement integration tactics, developing community partnerships, and there were very few multi-level interventions. Finally, I think it reminds us through Fawn's framework that every digital learning modality carries ethical and educational entanglements. When we choose a platform, a schedule, or assessment tool, we're also shaping students' relationship with movement, their motivation, and their self-concept. In fully remote physical education, that power is magnified because there's no gym, there's no hallway, there's no high fives, there's no good job or playground to buffer the design. Only the digital structure we create and the approaches we use to empower student participation and engagement in their own highly variable contexts. So where do we go from here? First, as we've heard through this presentation, I think we all know digital learning is here to stay, for better or for worse. Global governments, including the EU and global organizations, including UNICEF, view digital learning positively, it appears, and they view it as a means to reduce educational inequities across the globe. With that in mind, we need to advocate for and design these experiences with entanglement in mind. This means recognizing that pedagogical choices in virtual physical education and across all digital modalities are never just about efficiency or content delivery. They're value-laden and can shape how students see themselves as movers and learners. We need to reimagine these whole-of-school frameworks. Physical activity promotion in virtual schools must include movement breaks, asynchronous engagement, family and household involvement, and support for active living in diverse home and community environments. The school must expand into digital homes and communities. And the last thing is I think we need to center student humanity, especially as AI and automation likely will become part of virtual physical education platforms. We need to ask, how are we supporting student joy? How are we supporting their agency and their human connection? Are we amplifying student voice or simply standardizing the experience and sterilizing students' lived experiences? In sum, fully remote physical education presents some real risks of isolation and inequity, but also real opportunities for rethinking what an active, inclusive, and student-centered virtual school could look like. Fawn's entangled pedagogy helps us see that the work ahead is not only about choosing the right tools, but really it's about designing the right relationships across the educational ecosystem of students, communities, environments, and institutions. So that's what I had. What questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chad. There's several questions in the chat, some from Fiona around the digital divide, and also connecting to different theories, for example, Siemens' learning theory on connectivism. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to ask if we could perhaps take those questions, dare I say, offline, but in a different space, just so that we can conclude this session, if that's okay, Chad. Could you skip forward to the next orange looking slide? Fantastic, thank you. So a big thank you to all our speakers today. We've had Ove, Maria Jose, and we finished off with a presentation from Chad. Just to conclude this session, if you are going to AIESEP in Florida, we will see you there. We have a Tech SIG pre-conference session, which I'm sure the conversation from today will continue. So please do join us if you can. It would be great to see you there, and just come and say hello and join in the conversation. That's a little bit more information, and we'd just like to say a huge thank you for all your attention today. I'm sorry that we couldn't get around to everybody's questions in the chat, but some really interesting reflections and critical discussion, which I'm sure the conversation will continue. So that's a big thank you from me and the rest of the speakers, and I will hand back to Christy to close the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for the presentations today. Just to reassure everybody that all of the information will also be coming out by the Flash blog. So the team are also going to share what they've talked about today in a electronic format, so that you can actually process it a little bit more in your own time and be able to follow up with questions, as I'm sure that they'll be able to put their email addresses in and their main email address, which is aiseptechsig@gmail.com, for the follow-up questions that you might have. So thank you again to the team for the presenting today, and thank you everybody to coming to our Connect. Our next one will be after the conference. We will be heading to June, where we'll be looking at physical education teacher assembly. We look forward to welcome you to Florida, and thank you so much for today.